Okay, let's dig into this. We're going to look at some potential future scenarios today.
Right. And these are, well, they're fascinating, but maybe a little unsettling too.
Exactly. Think of this as, a way to get the gist of some specific predictions without wading through hours of source material yourself.
And the source today is a YouTube video, Wyzia Prasushi Prashini Wyzia Live from Jasnodzi Krzysztof Jackowski official.
Yeah, and it's interesting right off the bat, despite the live in the title, it actually wasn't streamed live.
Correct. It was recorded, then uploaded the next day, and it focuses on visions linked to the full moon and just generally what might be coming down the pike.
So our mission here really is to pull out the key potential developments, the warnings maybe, from this video.
Give you the core ideas so you understand the possibilities without needing to watch the whole thing.
Let's dive in. First up seems to be the domestic political situation in Poland. The source suggests some, well, pretty big shifts could be coming.
Indeed. It kicks off with a really potent image, a great fire of a building.
A fire. Wow. Any specifics?
The source speculates maybe a major government office, could even be a TV station. It sets a pretty dramatic tone.
Yeah, suggests upheaval, disruption maybe.
It does make you wonder, yeah, what kind of event sparks a vision like that, especially in the current political climate?
And that feeling, that potential for crisis, seems to carry over to the government itself.
The prediction is that Prime Minister Tusk's government might face a major crisis. It could even potentially collapse after the next elections.
That points to some serious instability being predicted for Poland.
But then there's an interesting twist related to the presidential race.
Oh.
If Trzaskowski wins the presidency, the source suggests that might actually stabilize Tusk's government.
Huh. So they're sort of linked in this vision, like one outcome props up the other.
It seems that way. A kind of delicate interdependency is implied. Maybe about presenting a united front, perhaps.
Okay, but even if Trzaskowski winning helps the government, the outlook for Tusk, personally, not so great, according to this source.
No, not really. The prediction is he could fall into disfavor, face significant political criticism.
That'd be quite the turnaround from where he is now. What could trigger that, I wonder?
The source doesn't detail the trigger, but it flows into this idea of a retreat for Platforma Obywatelska, or the whole ruling coalition, really.
A retreat, meaning losing power or influence.
Yeah, the sense is their current position might not hold. They could be looking at a period of decline.
Which again raises questions: public dissatisfaction, other forces rising.
Could be any number of things. And it's not just politics facing headwinds. The source also mentions farmers.
Ah, right. What about them?
Predicts significant losses for farmers in the near term.
Why?
Potentially linked to climate-related events hitting Poland, maybe even wider than that.
Climate events.
Yeah.
Like drought, flooding, something else.
Exactly. Things like severe droughts, floods, maybe extreme temperatures. If farmers face significant losses,
That impacts food prices, the wider economy, potentially exports too.
definitely. And it fits with those broader global worries about climate change and agriculture.
Okay, so domestic instability, agricultural concerns.
Sure.
What about the international picture? The source mentions something pretty intriguing there.
Yes, this secret international political plan involving Ukraine and Poland specifically.
Secret plan. Sounds dramatic. What's the nature of it?
It hints at potentially forming a co-state or some kind of very close union between Poland and Ukraine.
A co-state.
Yeah.
Wow. That would be a massive geopolitical shift in Eastern Europe.
Huge. And what's really interesting is the prediction of international pressure on Poland to agree to this union.
So not necessarily driven by Poland or Ukraine, but pushed from outside.
That's the implication. It makes you ask, well, who would be pushing and why?
And the vision suggests the benefits lean towards Ukraine.
It seems so. The idea presented is that this could give Ukraine access to EU benefits, maybe NATO benefits too, assuming NATO's still around in its current form.
It's framed as a kind of strategic political play then.
A maneuver, yeah. Which naturally brings up questions about sovereignty and how much external pressure can shape national decisions.
And how would people in Poland and Ukraine even feel about something like that? Lots of unanswered questions there.
Definitely. Now, speaking of international relations, let's touch on Polish-German relations. The source takes a, well, surprising turn here.
Okay. How so?
Well, we have the context. Tusk saying Poland wouldn't seek German reparations for World War II.
Right, I remember that.
But then the prediction is that Germany, maybe with European backing, might start raising questions about the legality of Poland's current borders.
Whoa. Which borders?
specifically mentioning former East and West Prussia, old German lands.
That's getting into some really sensitive historical territory, isn't it?
Deeply sensitive. But the source does clarify something important.
Okay.
It's not necessarily predicting Germany trying to physically reclaim land.
Okay, so what is it suggesting?
It's presented more as a potential policy asserting claims against Poland, almost like leverage.
Leverage. To stop Poland from bringing up reparations again.
That seems to be the potential dynamic hinted at. A complex, high-stakes geopolitical game being played out, or at least envisioned.
It definitely sounds like it. Okay, let's shift gears completely. From borders to bites the internet.
Ah, yes. This is another major potential disruption mention.
What's the prediction?
A sudden internet outage, or maybe just severely limited access, not just one country, but potentially several, maybe even across Europe.
Just imagine the chaos. Communication, business, just daily life ground to a halt.
It connects to that recurring idea you sometimes hear about the 3 days of darkness.
Right, but the source interprets that differently.
Yeah, not necessarily literal darkness, but more like a massive disruption of essential electronic systems, the internet being primary, maybe electricity too.
That really makes you think about how dependent we are.
Totally reliant, and it immediately raises concerns about, well, money. Saving. If the internet is down for a prolonged period, especially if there's economic instability swirling around, how do you access your bank, your savings?
Yeah, accessing funds, managing anything online, it could become incredibly difficult, maybe impossible for a time.
It paints a pretty unsettling picture of systemic vulnerability, how fragile our digital infrastructure might be.
It certainly does. Okay, let's circle back to Polish politics again. The predictions go even further than just a crisis for the current government.
Right. The source suggests a scenario where sometime after the presidential elections, the ruling coalition itself could start to crack.
How would that happen?
The vision suggests maybe a coalition partner pulls out, possibly tempted by the opposition, with promises of future power sharing.
Classic political maneuvering. But that could really destabilize things again.
Exactly. And the predicted outcome for Tusk in this scenario.
Let me guess, not good.
The phrase used is potentially leaving office in disgrace.
Wow. So that reinforces the earlier prediction about his political fortunes declining significantly.
It does. It paints a picture of a potentially dramatic fall. Now, the source also steps back and offers a broader critique
Of the whole political system in Poland.
Yeah, and the influence of external forces. There's a pretty strong assertion that most Poles are subservient to the system.
Subservient, that's a strong word.
It is. And the claim is that Poland is under strong external influence, affecting both major political parties, the current government, and the opposition.
So the argument is that foreign influence is deeply embedded on both sides.
That's the essence of it. And the logical conclusion drawn is
that electing a president tied to either of those established parties won't fundamentally change that external influence.
precisely. It suggests the real levers of power might lie elsewhere, or at least be heavily influenced from outside.
So what's the proposed solution in the vision?
The election of an entirely independent president, someone completely outside those established structures.
Is that seen as likely?
Well, the speaker in the source expresses skepticism, doubt that Polish citizens are ready for that kind of choice, even says they'd be surprised if it happened.
So a call for independence, but pessimism about whether it can actually be achieved.
Kind of reflects a deep doubt about the appetite for truly breaking from the established political mold and potentially those external influences.
It's a critique that then broadens out even further, looking back since 1990.
Yes. Reflecting on that whole period's supposed democracy, supposed capitalism since the fall of communism,
And the observation is?
that the existing political parties have, in the speaker's view, effectively kept control over the population throughout that time.
Raising questions about how much really changed or how democratic the system truly is.
Exactly. And the key example used to illustrate this is healthcare.
What about the healthcare system?
The point made is that despite 35 years of this supposed transformation away from communism, the healthcare system is seen as deteriorating.
Deteriorating how?
Long waiting times are highlighted for both public and private healthcare, even with lots of money supposedly going into the system.
That seems paradoxical, doesn't it? Long waits even in the private sector.
It does. And it's used to underscore this potential disconnect between the political narrative of progress and the actual lived experience of citizens trying to access basic services.
So it serves as a stark example, making you ask, if this hasn't been fixed in 35 years.
Then what will future elections really change if these fundamental systemic issues persist regardless of who is in power?
It's a real challenge to the status quo, prompting a deeper look at what progress actually means.
It certainly encourages a more critical eye on political structures and their real-world effectiveness.
Okay, so just to recap the main potential scenarios we've pulled from this source. There's the possibility of significant political instability in Poland.
Right, maybe a government crisis, Tusk standing potentially falling.
Then that really intriguing, maybe controversial idea of a Polish-Ukrainian union, possibly driven by international pressure.
And alongside that, potential new tensions with Germany over historical border questions, used perhaps as political leverage.
And don't forget the big one, the risk of a major internet disruption, possibly part of a wider electronic systems failure.
Which raises serious questions about communications, services, even financial security.
And finally, that broader critique of the Polish political system itself, concerns about external influence, and whether elections can really address deep-seated problems like healthcare.
It's definitely a lot to think about, and it's crucial, like you said, to remember this is all based on interpretations from one specific source.
Absolutely. But it does offer some, well, compelling food for thought about directions things could potentially head.
And maybe it leaves us, and you listening, with a final question to ponder.
Which is?
In this super interconnected world we live in, where does national sovereignty really begin and end? And maybe more urgently, how resilient are we, our societies, our systems, to major disruptions, whether they come from politics, climate, or technology?
That's definitely something to chew on long after this deep dive is over.